Hey, Pat Rigsby here, and in this episode, I want to share a couple lessons I've learned in doing over 300 podcasts. So let's get to it. Welcome to the Fitness Business School podcast, the show for fitness business owners who want to grow their income, increase their impact, and improve their lifestyle. Be sure to listen till the end of this episode because we have a brand new special offer exclusive for listeners. So stay tuned. So I was looking back through some notes I had, and I realized that my first podcast episode released on August 2nd, 2016. I interviewed Todd Durkin for the Ideal Business Show, which has now become the Fitness Business School. Largely because ideal business was not necessarily a term that the fitness business owner would instantly latch onto. It's something that I'm trying to, continually educate people on. So we changed the name and changed the format a little bit. But since then I've done, I believe, over 350 episodes. The number that was thrown out to me yesterday was like 376, with like 300 in the current format that we're running now. If you think about it, 300 plus episodes is a lot, considering what I believe fewer than 10% of podcasts make it to more than 20 episodes. So, let's face it, 300's a little bit more than 20. So there are a couple of things that I've learned along the way, in addition to the vast sort of lessons I learned from interviewing guests, from sharing things that it kind of forced me to consolidate my thoughts on. The lessons that I want to talk about today are just kind of in the process of creating over 300 episodes of podcasts. So the first version of this, the Ideal Business Show, was more an interview format where I did it for the goal, in many ways, of being able to go out and schedule time to spend with other professionals, other business owners that I respected a great deal. Many of whom, in fact, most of whom I already considered a good friend. It's just because all of these people were entrepreneurial, they're busy, most of them live pretty far away. We didn't have a whole lot of scheduled opportunities to catch up. So selfishly, I wanted to create a scenario where I could sit down and chat with these folks and stay connected with them. So it was a lot about relationship building and networking, and created, maybe 60 or 70 episodes that way. And what was cool was these folks all had their own iteration of their own ideal business, and it didn't exactly mirror mine. So as I talked about creating your ideal business, I could kind of shine a spotlight on the fact that ideal doesn't mean uniformity, everybody having the same thing. So that was the first version of the podcast. And frankly, it was tremendously enjoyable. But as I kind of started to run through it, I didn't want to get to the point where I was just interviewing random people to just keep the podcast going. I had already interviewed 50, 60, 70 people, and I felt like that was, those were all people that I knew well enough that I could shine that spotlight on them, and I could feel confident that the things that I shared were going to be valuable to my audience, and then it was going to be congruent with what I wanted this podcast to be about. Well, so as I kind of started to see that well dry up a little bit, and I started getting all these messages saying, well, hey, this person would be a great guest for your podcast. That person would. I'm like, no, I'm not running a podcast to just promote other people indiscriminately. I'm just, that wasn't the goal. So I said, okay, I need to kind of hit the pause button and decide what I want the next iteration of this to be. So The next version of the podcast kind of was, hey, I'm just going to do coaching sessions. I feel like, I'm sure I've done more one-on-one business coaching sessions with fitness professionals than anybody else on earth. There have been plenty of people who've been doing stuff for a long period of time or whatever else, but a lot of those guys were like workshop people or that sort of thing. But for me, I've always really gravitated to coaching. And so I thought, well, you know what? I could just do a recorded coaching session and, there'll be a lot of opportunity. A mentor and friend of mine, Dean Jackson, does that with his More Cheese, Less Whiskers podcast, and I love it as a consumer. So I thought, well, I could do that and do coaching sessions, and that would be really helpful to the person I was coaching. It'd be really helpful to the audience because they could certainly get ideas and tips, and it might even get them to say, well, hey, I'd like to hire Pat to get personalized coaching from him. Well, it was fun to do, but logistically it was kind of a pain because I didn't have a really systematic schedule to do it. I'd have people no show. I'd have people cancel because it wasn't a paid coaching session. It was free. And so I don't think people valued it quite enough. And logistically, it just made it hard to have a consistent production schedule. So I kind of put that on pause, went back to the drawing board and said, here's what I know I can count on. I've been doing a daily email for, at the time, probably 15 years. And I did really well with sending out this daily email because there was a method that I could use to be consistent. So I started scheduling our good friend Paul to come over and serve as the podcast producer, whereas he had mostly been doing video production for us for a decade. And we had a set time that probably 90% of the time we'd just stick to Wednesday mornings, and ironically enough, today is Thursday morning when I'm recording this. But I knew if he was coming, I needed to have things ready. So there was a deadline. There was a kind of a uniform goal. We would record, 3 podcast episodes. I wanted it to be kind of in line with what the newsletter was. And so short bite-sized lessons that people could latch on to that usually were in the 10-minute range. I mean, not always, because sometimes my newsletters are longer too, but and no holding back. This isn't just the normal interview format. It's like, hey, I'm going to share things that I would with you if you were sitting in front of me in my office doing a coaching session. And that format has allowed me, with obviously Paul's help, but I mean, honestly, Paul does like 90% of the work here and I do like 10, to be really consistent. I mean, we roll out like 3 episodes a week every week. And so I think that there are a few lessons that I've picked up here along the way, aside from the gold that I've picked up learning from some of the guests I've had and different things. Like the first is, you need some sort of plan to get started, but it doesn't have to be a perfect plan. I've gone through 3 iterations of this podcast to arrive at the format that I'm at now. And I'm not going to tell you this is the permanent format, but it's certainly a format that has allowed it to be very consistent. So the first format, I had a plan that served the goal that I wanted it to have. And so that was the second thing, is I had a goal to do this. I had a specific outcome that I wanted. And for me, that outcome was probably less about, number of downloads or consumer facing stuff, and more about, hey, how do I strengthen relationships I have with people that I'm already friends with, and how do I provide real value for the people who are already paying attention to me. And that's kind of been the theme with my podcast throughout. I'm all for, getting more downloads or whatever else. But I see the podcast as a vehicle to better coach, educate, serve the people who already know of me more than as a lead generation tool. Yeah, it's great if people's first kind of connection with me is the podcast, but in most cases, I feel like it's usually somebody who's already aware of me, and this is a format that they prefer to consume. Like for me, I'm way better at consuming podcasts or audios than I am video, because I can do it, I can do it on a walk, I can do it working out, I can do it without having to be stationary in front of a computer. So the format was big. So having a plan, finding a rhythm to be consistent, setting a deadline. That Wednesday morning kind of podcast schedule for us has been gold for me, because there have been plenty of times that I'm like, man, I don't know what I want to cover, or I'm kind of having the verbal equivalent of writer's block or whatever, and somehow they still get done. And I think it allows me to organize my thoughts, and it's been tremendously valuable in setting that deadline and saying, this is when I do this thing. And the next step is, being willing to adapt and evolve and not feel like, hey, if I'm tethered to this interview format forever. No, I mean, you find the thing that works for you, that you can be consistent with, you do it over time. And, and then for me, understanding what role I was going to be best served at playing in the podcast, and finding somebody I could trust to play the other roles. Having Paul be the producer of the podcast, well, I already knew and trusted Paul and knew he would take care of it. I could do the part that I wanted, so I didn't dread doing it, because I could kind of play to my strengths and know what my responsibility is, and not think about, well, how do I get this part done, or how do I get that part done? Again, tremendously valuable for me to be able to understand that, this is my job. My job isn't everybody's job. So, having a way to get started, having a plan, having that goal, having deadlines and a schedule to do things, and instead of thinking, well, I'll just fit it in whenever, playing my best role. And then I think in both like the original iteration and when Paul took over producing it, I think committing to the long game was the other big piece of this puzzle. I knew in the beginning, I said, okay, I'm going to do this for 6 months no matter what. I don't care if 2 people listen to it. I'm going to do this for me for 6 months, because without doing it for 6 months, I'm not going to have any idea whether or not it's good, whether or not, like, I'm not going to be good at it because it's new to me. There's not going to be a big enough sample size to know what's right and what's wrong. Kind of the same thing with this, like, current iteration is, we've kind of kept punching the clock on this, and I'm not somebody who goes and reviews the number of downloads every week or whatever else, because, when I do ask, those numbers are increasing, but they're not increasing because I'm micromanaging it. They're increasing because we're doing the work that we want to do, and we're being consistent at it, and it compounds over time. And so for me, thinking, okay, if I'm going to adopt a new marketing channel, if I'm going to adopt any sort of new thing like this, if I'm not willing to commit to it for at least 6 months, then I shouldn't do the first day. Because you have to be bad at stuff before you're good at it. You have to be willing to practice and figure it out. And like I said before, I mean, automatically, like, you're in that top 10% if you just make it to 20 episodes doing this, right? So I mean, without question, I'm in the top 1% of all podcasters as far as number of episodes created. And that was just kind of staying the course. So hopefully some of these simple takeaways are valuable to you, and hopefully maybe it even prompts you to go back and listen to some of those earlier episodes, because man, I interviewed Todd Durkin and John Berardi, and I've interviewed Eric Cressy a couple times. I've interviewed all sorts of industry leaders who approach things not necessarily the same as me, but found their own way to ideal. So there's some really cool things there. There are all sorts of lessons and tips that I think, if you were to go just put this stuff into action, you could totally transform a business. So lots of gold here. Don't hold anything back. I've probably been brutally honest many times over in things that I've not done well as all the things that might have helped me along the way. So thanks for listening, and hopefully the lessons I shared today can help you grow your own business. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Fitness Business School. Before you go, I have a quick announcement. When I first connect with a fitness business owner, they almost always ask me how they can grow, how they can accelerate their progress. Well, I have an exclusive offer for you, and it's going to help you do just that, to accelerate you building the business that you want to own, getting more clients, generating more revenue, increasing your income, improving your lifestyle. And as a listener of this show, you can test drive our ideal business accelerator coaching program for free. IBA is a one-of-a-kind program where you're going to get everything from done-for-you marketing tools and a level of coaching that's unmatched in our industry, to getting actual direction on how to build the business that you want, a blueprint from where you are to where you want to be. So you're going to be able to attract those clients that you want to work with. You're going to be able to increase your income. You're going to be able to improve your lifestyle. And all of that is going to be more readily accessible to you than you ever thought possible, because we're going to give you every tool, template, ads, script, everything that you need, plus over 10 weekly live video coaching sessions to help you with everything from dialing in your ads to mastering your mindset. All of this is stuff that you get when you join the Ideal Business Accelerator. And to help you succeed, I'm going to do something that really is kind of unmatched in our industry. I'm going to let you test drive IBA at zero cost. If it delivers for you in the way that I know that it will, it's going to more than pay for itself, and you're probably going to want to stay. But if not, no sweat. You're out nothing, and you have a library of proven tools and resources to keep and to help you going forward. To take advantage of this special offer, just email me at pat@patrigsby.com and put test drive in the subject line, and I'll get you all the details.